Hello everyone, this is a tutorial about trade policies in developing countries and mainly dealing with import substitution industrialization and economic dualism and link between these two. There has been a belief that key to economic development is really having a strong manufacturing sector. And one way to have a strong manufacturing sector is to really protect your industry at the expense of imports. You expect your industry to have a potential comparative advantage that the industry would reach sometime in the future, but right now it is in the infancy stage and needs to be protected and nurtured. There has been a success with infant industry argument, mainly with the US and Germany that adopted this in the 19th century. Also, Japan had extensive import controls for a long time as well. And seeing the success of these two countries, a lot of developing countries started protecting their manufacturing sectors. Right? So there have been arguments in favor of infant industry protection. One such argument is that there are certain market failures that prevents an industry from reaching its comparative advantage. A sector has the potential to reach a high level of productivity such that the country might have a comparative advantage in the future, but at this point in time it is being constrained and restricted by other sectors, and one might be imperfect capital markets. It's not easy for this exporting sector to avail of capital or borrow money at the market interest rate, and it might just be that there are no banks in those rural areas where these exporting sectors might be. Now, so the growth of the industry might be restricted because of imperfect capital markets, or a probability argument where you have certain goods that have a large proportion of benefits accruing to the society, not to the private sector that might invest in it. So you might have low levels of investment in those sectors. And then other adjoining sectors as well, like transportation sector, you might not have decent roads to transport the goods from the place where it's being produced to where it needs to be shipped to, and this might just be leading to a higher cost. You need to protect these industries till the other sectors also develop, and you'll have a competitive advantage in the future. If you allow for imports to come in at this point in time, what's going to happen is that your own industry will not be able to compete with these imports, not because it is not productive, but because it has other sectors that are pulling it down. Right? And But what we've observed is that this import substitution industrialization has not really worked the way it was supposed to, the way that it worked for the US and for Germany. There are some problems with the infant industry argument that had been ignored earlier. One is industry might have a comparative advantage in the future, but how much further in the future do you think you might have that advantage? And would it make sense to protect the industry right now if after 20 years you might have comparative advantage? One example that is offered is of South Korea, which protected its industry for 20 years. And it's only now that we see Kia trying to compete with other automobiles. And number two, some of these industries that these countries are trying to protect might not really have a comparative advantage even in the future. So there might be a wrong assumption about which industries might have a comparative advantage. Right? And here we talk about Pakistan and India that have had protection for its industry for a long time. And it's once India had to lower its tariff rates, the protection that it was offering its import competing sectors in the 90s, we observed that the industries could not really compete with the outside world, and it's still the light manufacturing sectors that are able to really compete. And then we have the pharmaceutical sector as well now. And then the third is, well, what if you do protect your industry and the industry is producing for the domestic market, but the domestic demand is too small? It's so small that you're actually producing at an inefficient scale of production. That means you're producing such a small amount that you can't really avail of economies of scale that might exist in the industry. Right? And in that sense, you'll never really drive down the average cost. You'll never bring down the cost of producing the good because of the restricted demand that exists in your country. So in that case, you'll never have the comparative advantage because you'll never ever produce at a scale to bring down your cost. Right? Now, so what has been the result of adopting import substitution industrialization in these countries? Well, there has been higher rates of effective protection and inefficient scale of production in these industries. And the main one that we'll discuss in this lecture is high income inequality and unemployment in these countries. Right? This is a table which shows the effective rate of protection for various countries at various points in time, and what you see for Pakistan, 271% of tariffs being imposed on imports, whereas for Mexico you see only 26%. So really different countries are adopting different kinds of trade policies, some very protective measures, some not so protective measures, and India hovers around 300% as well. Right? So where are we going with this? Well, we want to look at economic dualism. What is economic dualism? It's exactly what this picture shows you. There is a modern sector that exists with a whole slum area around it. Right? So you have high levels of unemployment in the city, and this unemployment is arising because you have a traditional sector which is offering them a very lower wage compared to the modern sector, and people are migrating from rural areas to urban areas. Right? So you see a slum right next to a big city here. And really, all countries, while they developed, go through this period of duality. Okay. Because development really proceeds unevenly, and you have dual economy where modern sector starts performing much better than a traditional sector. Traditional sector lags behind, and you have dualism, and then countries develop further and this duality disappears. Right? Now, what are the symptoms of dualism? How do you define or how do you characterize economic duality? Well, you have two sectors coexisting with very different characteristics. You have a modern industrial sector which has a high value of output per worker. So labor productivity is really high in these sectors compared to the agriculture sector. There's a huge wage differential. Wages are much higher in the modern sector compared to the agriculture or the traditional sector. Higher capital intensity in the manufacturing in the modern sector, further increasing the labor productivity, and then you have persistent unemployment around the urban areas. Those were the slums that we saw in that picture. And this is the high level of unemployment that exists in the urban areas. Right? Now, how are import substitution, industrialization, and economic dualism linked? Well, if you have this high levels of unemployment around your urban areas, that means the modern sector is not able to absorb these people that are migrating from rural to urban areas. Right? So the believers in ISI really think that the ISI can ease dualism. And if there is economic duality, then maybe what policies developing countries should be following is one of protection, import substitution industrialization. They protect their manufacturing sector or the modern sector from imports. The prices in these sectors rise, and production would increase, and hence employment increases, and you deal with a decreasing unemployment. Right? So that's really what their argument is in favor of ISI. Now, the other argument, the counter argument, is that actually, you know what, the dualism has been worsened by import substitution industrialization. So it's actually a cause of these severe levels of dualism found in developing countries these days, not a solution. Right? So these are the arguments and the counter arguments for whether you should use ISI when you have economic dualism. So let's look at the first argument. As I mentioned earlier, import substitution industrialization can ease dualism by reducing unemployment. You protect the import substitution, import competing sectors, your manufacturing sectors, your modern sectors from imports. You block out imports. The production takes place at home. There's increase in production. There's increase in manufacturing goods. Employment increases, and you can deal with these slum areas, these high levels of unemployment in urban areas. The counter argument is, well, not really. What has been observed in some developing countries is that there has been an increase in economic duality as a result of import substitution industrialization. Right? So it's actually causing it, not helping. And the ones to come up with were Harris and Todaro. They came up with this model which links, they explain this counter-argument by linking the rural to urban migration and unemployment in urban cities. Right? And it undermines the migration undermines the case of favoring manufacturing employment. Right? So really what they were suggesting is that, right, if you protect the manufacturing sectors and the prices are increasing these sectors, so wages are also increasing these sectors. So you're increasing this wage disparity between traditional sector and the urban sector. And their argument is really based on this evidence that we see that highly dualistic economies also have a high level of urban unemployment. Right? And so the main link that they are making is between the rural to urban migration, which is so large that the increase in urban employment cannot keep up with this migration, and urban unemployment actually rises. Now that would happen because you're protecting the manufacturing sector, the modern sector, right? The prices are going up, the wages are going up, it has higher returns, and so you see capital moving more towards the modern sector. Is becoming more productive. The wages are increasing. At the same time, the traditional sector is lagging behind. The productivity isn't increasing at the same pace. The wages aren't going up. There is a huge disparity now, that wage disparity between modern sector and traditional sector. So more people are going to be dissatisfied in the rural areas and move towards urban areas. So really the problem is your traditional sector that is not really able to increase productivity. Okay, so these are pictures of some traditional sectors in India, and what we see here is really that there hasn't been any improvement in technology being used in the agriculture sector. The labor productivity is really low. As a result, you see the wages lower in these traditional sectors than modern sectors. Trade policy has really been accused of widening this wage differential as well as fostering excess capital intensity in the modern sector. By imposing high tariffs, you're keeping the prices in the manufacturing sectors artificially high, which then increases the capital intensity in these sectors because it's more profitable to invest in these sectors because of higher prices. Is resources moving away from agriculture towards the modern sector? To deal with economic dualism, you really have to attack the problem of rural to urban migration. You have to deal with this wage inequality by increasing the labor productivity in the traditional sector. Right?